Hello. That's how we say greetings in America or in English. It is good to see you. Welcome to a special Sunday edition of the Gabbin' and the Games. If you are curious about what that great song was, that was the God of War tier member himself, Alixplox, also member of the great band Circus in the Sea with his solo called Offworlds. I think the album's coming out pretty soon. I just dropped a link into the chat right there. So it is called Offworld. So if you want to pick it up or listen to it or follow Alex, you can do that easily. Somebody in the chat is already saying, hey, has anybody noticed the random dislike bombing? I think it's got to be an age thing, fellas. It's got to be something where, people talk about, like, it might be a generational thing where it's kind of like people talk about being ratio. Like, I don't give a fuck. It's like, who gives a shit whether you like the video or not? YouTube still takes it as engagement. I don't give a fuck. God, dislike the video. My goodness gracious, man. So listen, fellas, here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about a bunch of things. We're going to kick it off talking about some news that just came out today. I think it was about Psychonauts 2 and about how they made that game. Then we are going to chat about an article written by a pal of mine that I think I linked. I think I did link it about. It's not just really cloud gaming, but his article is about cloud gaming, but it really is a bigger topic. It's about how cloud gaming may be reflective of a bigger, problems making it a little dramatic, but a ceiling in the industry and how that could affect a lot of things. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about EA. E3, of course, we're going to talk about how relevant it is, and I have some thoughts. Of course, I have some thoughts, because that's just sort of how my brain stem works, fellas. It's not the stem part that works, you know what I'm saying. It's the medulla oblongata. But in the meantime, and obviously put yourself into the voiceover call-in waiting room if you want to call in. Yes, but the first call we will be taking very soon, and I'm going to get his name wrong, because I always get his name wrong. But I believe, and I think he's watching right now, it's Sohrab. Sohrab is the guy who wrote this article. He used to run a website called Sony Rumors. We will bring him in just a couple of minutes. Let me go right to the chat, get a couple of chats out of here. I don't mean like ban you. I mean, respond. This is not a members only chat. Hang on a minute. Let me fix this. I apologize. There you go. Free. This is a free chat is what this goddamn thing is. This is a goddamn free chat. There we go. I think that should be working now. Okay. So the rumored Deadspace announced next month is more hype than anything you'll be talking about today. Well, Spirit, here's the problem. I don't give a fuck about the new Deadspace that is currently being hyped up. And here's why. And we're going to talk about Kojima as well, and Silent Hill or Silent Hills as well. But ultimately, it's a brand name, and it's not a brand name that really means a whole hell of a lot to a large number of people. I'm not saying core gamers don't care about it, but if you're a core enough gamer to really know Deadspace, which has been a dormant franchise for 10 years, maybe a little more, and a dormant relevant franchise since Dead Space 2, then ultimately, if you're that in the weeds with Dead Space, which you should be because it's a phenomenal franchise, you should be more excited by what the guys who made Dead Space are doing, which is, I forget what they call it. They announced it recently, but that is the follow-up, really. That's the spiritual sequel to Dead Space. That is what is being made. But if you're just taking, again, I'm not saying, EA could have gone out and hired Sony Santa Monica to make Dead Space. Okay, sure, then we'll have a conversation. But simply just saying Dead Space is a big, exciting announcement, no, I don't think it is. We'll get to sort of we'll get to something similar. Callisto Protocol, right, Christopher? That's what it's called. And again, I loved Dead Space 2, as Hogwash is trying to crack wise while he's also in the process of trying to watch Hell in a Cell over on the WWE Peacock channel. He is not wrong in that I absolutely loved Dead Space. Thought it was fucking great, Dead Space 2. Okay, so but that's what's going on. Okay, so listen, we are going to first kick off a little bit of a story from the good folks at DoubleFine. I talked to Tim Schafer recently. Actually, before we do that, I got to let you guys know something. We're doing a little shindig today. All right. One of our great sponsors, one of our great God of War tier members is Rotten Tanuki. I always get his name wrong, but he has Day One Patch Kids, which are these great video game sort of satire cards, t-shirts, mugs. I have like 2 mugs on the way that haven't come yet with his art on them. But he has sent me to send to you a series of his cards, all sort of pristine mint condition. I got 2 sleeves of these. I've got his whole first generation collection. Really funny, really cool, really neat things. So later in the show, I will be doing some trivia, and whoever gets the trivia right, I'm going down to UPS tomorrow to mail some things out to some people who have design documents coming, who donated to the Crohn's disease stream a couple of weeks ago. I'll also be mailing this tomorrow, but you got to be in America, though. Got to be in America. Okay. But anyway, point being is keep an eye out. We'll be doing trivia for that. And thank you, as always, Day One Patch Kids, for your generous support and your great sense of humor. Look at that toothache right here. My favorite one. That's where that one comes from, behind me on the wall there. That's the artist in the same, right there. Good old toothache. Okay. So it comes out today that Psychonauts, according to them, is coming in August, which we knew that from a couple days ago, but they're not going to have, it's coming out and there was no crunch. Okay. So let's assume, like, as some of you guys know, I had a little bit of skepticism when the news came out that Insomniac was not having any crunch on Ratchet and Clank. I'm like, I don't know if I really believe that. There were only 2 people who came out and said it. I asked somebody who would know, and they kind of gave me a spinny answer, which was like, Insomniac values, balance. I'm sure they do, but was there crunch on Ratchet and Clank? I couldn't really get a direct answer. Not that it was this person's job to answer. I mean, why would, he owes me nothing. But I did want to ask, right? So maybe that's true, maybe it's not true. But what's interesting about this story is really... It gives you some insight into, it really presents you with a choice, right? And again, I don't mind it, but I'm very curious because a lot of times I think a lot of these folks who are anti-crunch online, a lot of it's just sort of virtue signaling. And the reason I say that, or the reason I think that, is that they turn around anyway and they buy the games that were made with crunch. So I think a lot of it's just a bunch of hot air. And I think most industries crunch, whatever. You know my take on crunch. But what's interesting about this one is, let's say they didn't crunch. And I don't think, I'll talk to Tim Schafer about it when he's on. I would not, it would stun me if Tim wasn't busting his ass with his team to not crunch, because he's a good dude. He's a genuinely good human being. But what I'll say about this is, basically, look how long this title has been in production, right? So it was announced, and they raised money for it, I think, on Fig, which is like the investment site, 5 years ago. Okay, so this game is a game that's been in production anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 years, give or take. And obviously there was pre-production before they announced it. And on top of it, they have the Microsoft money coming in now. So who's to say that if they wouldn't have had that, and they would have just had the Fig money, or whoever was publishing it or whatever, they would have had to crunch, right? But even that aside, though, it really becomes a question of, let's say it had nothing to do with Microsoft's infusion of cash. Let's say it had everything to do with the fact that they just said, look, we're going to take longer to make our games. Do you actually think that gamers would be okay with that? Would you be okay if you had to start waiting? Like if Sony Santa Monica announced tomorrow, God of War Ragnarok, or whatever they called it, was supposed to come out this March. I think it's going to be a March release or an April release, but whatever. But now, because we don't want to crunch the team, it will be out in a year. a year from now. And Horizon Forbidden West will not be out this Christmas. It will be out because we don't want the team to crunch. And we've heard you all online, and you've said crunch is horrible, and you want us to unionize, and we can't unionize right now. But we do want to work to give the customer what they want. You guys are telling us online you don't like the crunch. Not a problem, pal. We'll be bringing Horizon out. Instead of this holiday season in November, we are going to slide that. That's coming out like September of next year, right? Do you think gamers would lose their shit? I'm with Ricardo Estevez. Ricardo Estevez says, as a gamer, I don't care if a team did crunch or not, to be honest. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's none of my fucking business. I'm a consumer. And here's what I'll tell you. You know, if somebody, this is capitalism. You know, if you want to have a debate, it's not the show for it, but if you want to have a debate or discussion about capitalism, that's okay. But ultimately, let's say Sony does go down this route, no problem. Someone else will show up and they'll fucking eat their lunch. It's like, fine, Sony missed their window for Ragnarok in April. We'll go in and take that slot, and we'll crunch in order to get that slot. So Horizon says the game will come out when it comes out with the crunch or not. There's still delays, so it doesn't really matter. Well, no, I think what they're saying, or what I'm proposing, Horizon, if they were to say, we will come out as promised, but the team will have to crunch, do you care? Would you rather it come out sooner and just as good, but they just have to crunch? That's all I'm asking. And I'm only bringing it up because an article like this gets written, and it gets, you know, it's exactly what I thought would happen with the Insomniac article. It kind of, oh my God, these headphones, I need a stand. It kind of buries its way or burrows its way into the zeitgeist. And people start going, oh, well, they don't crunch at Microsoft. They don't crunch at Insomniac. And they really start to build this narrative, which I think, you know, is not necessarily giving you all the information, but you're able to sort of hold this flag up and see, some people can do these big games without crunch. Hogwash rarely, but for today, he has good points. He says, if Psychonauts releases and it's garbage, which I don't think it will be, but let's say it is, if Psychonauts releases and it's garbage, do we blame them for not crunching, right? I mean, that's the fucking thing. That's the goddamn truth. I don't believe, says AR, Insomniac did not crunch for that game. I would agree with you. I think that's a ridiculous. I mean, again, I don't know. I know Ted Price has consistently been a good dude, and a good dude whose company consistently ranks as one of the best places to work in Burbank or Los Angeles or whatever. There's no doubt the guy's heart is in the right place. And if he found a way not to crunch on a game, even though it's buggy, it's a classic. It is one of the best games I've played in a long time, and it's staggering looking. Now, again, it is a game that's kind of built off a cookie cutter template. They've made that game 50 fucking times almost. That obviously makes things a little bit easier, but, you know, who's to say? Well, there are many people to say, like Ted Price, but I can't tell you. George says there's some nuance to the conversation. However, I think we can all agree that teams of 100 plus people should not be doing 70-hour crunch weeks for more than a few months at the most. I don't know. A lot of people still played Red Dead Redemption 2 and didn't have a goddamn problem about it. I mean, I'm not talking at it from a human standpoint. Of course, I wouldn't want individuals in my life or individuals in the world to have a rough life and stuff. But, you know, it seems disingenuous to complain about crunch, but not really get to the bottom of why we crunch, which is, you know, the level of capitalist lack of regulation and things like that we have in America. So, I mean, think about that. I'm not going to get political, but think about that. You have to crunch. You literally have to crunch because your wife is having a baby and you need the health insurance. You don't want to be at Rockstar till 2 o'clock in the morning every day. You don't want to have to go in on Saturday and give up time with your family that's growing. But you know what? If you get fired or laid off from Rockstar because you're not one of the ones crunching, how are you going to pay for the baby to get born? I mean, baby will get born anyway, but you know what I'm saying. I think that's a real problem. That's the big problem we should be caring about. Not whether Cyberpunk had bugs, but it is what it is. Major Pest, I agree. Major Pest says crunch is the result of traversing the unknown. It's hard to predict and schedule. That's right. That's why if you make a game like the new Ratchet, which I love, I'm not taking the piss out of the new Ratchet, that is a game built off a template. It doesn't mean there's no new stuff in it, but it's it's sort of the best ever version of what they've been leaning towards since the first Ratchet and Clank. It's not as if they've reinvented the wheel. 9 Lives and Ethan both say Crunch is bad. Yeah, no one's sitting around going Crunch is good in terms of in a vacuum. But Crunch is how greatness happens a lot of times. People obsessed with things, people willing to not give up on things, people pushing themselves and their teammates to the breaking point. That's how we get some of the best movies, some of the best products, some of the best art. George says at a bare minimum, Crunch needs to be paid. Yeah, well, that'd be nice, but your title's price will go up, and that's okay too. Skeletank says Crunch is part of the industry, just how like a surgeon has to be on call 24/7. It's the same idea. It comes with a career. That's true. No sacrifice, no innovation, says Bacon. I agree with Bacon in that case. All right, well, there you go. That I just wanted to bring that up because that news was dropping today. I thought it was pretty interesting. And again, I am very excited for Psychonauts 2. I really love the creativity of that studio. I love Tim's creativity. And hopefully we will have him on soon to talk about it. By the way, speaking of on soon, Jazzy John Romero is coming onto the show Thursday. Now, it's a bit of a weird time because he will be zooming in from Ireland, which means I will be having that interview with John Romero, and he will be taking your calls if you want to chat with the good sir. He will be on at 7 a.m. California time. So if you're on the East Coast or if you're in Europe, this is the stream for you because I know a lot of times it comes too late for you. But 7 a.m. this coming Thursday, California time, John Romero. Okay. Crunch as a result of desire is okay, says Rahil, versus the boss telling you to get it out the door. Crunch is bad. Yeah, but what if the boss is the one who has a desire? What if the studio is the one that has a desire? I mean, you know, you going to take a vote? I mean, who gets to determine what guides the Crunch philosophy? That's different, though. Major Pest says Crunch can be from poor management or scheduling. That's totally different. If you have as I've said before, I have worked with people who scheduled military shit. The Evans and Sutherland guys on the Twisted Metal games. I have worked with some of the best producers in the business, with Shannon, with Nick Conanellis. Trust me, these are not guys who don't know how to schedule or are poor managers. But yes, if you absolutely have a poor manager, or someone who can't schedule, yeah, you got to get rid of them. That's a horrible. Yeah, that'll certainly lead to crunch. But I don't think that's what anybody's talking about. Or at least if they are, we're not talking about the same thing. We will get to the Kojima thing. We can talk Rick and Morty. We can talk all that stuff. But for now, I want to bring your very valuable attention to this article. I'm about to bring on the good sir who wrote it. The reason this is interesting to me, so I mean, again, I'm a fan more of subscription service gaming than cloud gaming. I think cloud gaming is absolutely the way games will be distributed. Whether or not that's 2 years from now, whether or not that's 8 years from now, that's debatable. And I think it's going to be gradual, just like digital was, until suddenly you looked around and digital was the dominant way people get video games. Because there is a bandwidth issue. There is a data cap issue some people have. But more and more those things are getting better. And I think more and more you'll start to see it becoming ubiquitous, and it just simply is the way we do it. But this article is really fascinating. I'm going to bring on the author. I'm going to pitch you the article because I want him to tell me if I am getting his point correct. And then we're going to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to get his name wrong. I've known this guy. We've talked. I've talked to his, I don't know if it's his wife or girlfriend, Allegra, but I've never actually been able to consistently say your name. I'm going to bring him on. He's a good dude. He's the guy who started the Sony Rumors channel website. Is it Sohrab? Are you there? Sohrab, where? Okay, well, he is. Okay, there you go. Are you there, bud? Sohrab. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. All good.
All right, you're real quiet. Can you turn your mic up a little bit?
I can absolutely do that. Give me 1 second. Let's see. I'm just going to my audio. How am I sounding now?
Oh my God, you sound so silky and sexy. I love it. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
How you been?
Hey.
How you been?
Good. How are you?
I am very good. I'm hot as shit here, though I don't like this weather. But
Dude,
you know,
I'm in LA too, man, and it is 100 degrees. It's been that for the past week, and holy shit, is it hot?
It is bad. It is bad. Although, you know, at least we're not in Arizona where I think it's like 120. So okay, we're gonna jump right to it because I always get yelled at. I always get yelled at when I don't keep the show moving, which I appreciate. So listen. You wrote this article, part 1. I don't know when part 2 is coming out, but let me try to pitch you your own article just so the audience can get a Cliff Notes version and you can tell me if I'm getting it right. But the gist of it is that you originally came into this as a journalist and as a fan of cloud gaming, feeling that this was the Netflix of gaming was going to happen, whether it was 5 years, 10 years, 3 days, who knows. And what I found fascinating about this article is you kind of drill down to some numbers that really are, if you're right, it's kind of scary, not just for cloud gaming, but for at least the way we look at console or mainstream gaming in general, which is you have this number that says there's a market of about 250 to 300 million people that every generation gets traded between the big three, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony, depending on who is ruling the roost. But you're saying it's never less than 200 million, and it has yet, even with the pandemic, to surpass 300 million. Where are you getting that data from?
So that number is specifically coming from former PlayStation CEO Sean Layden. And so that's where that number came from. And he's kind of been looking at a lot of the same things that I've been looking at, which is what is the general health of the industry? Where is it going? And what are some of the things that have been true about it 20 years ago that are still true about it now? So that's kind of where that number came from. And I don't think it's a number you've seen specifically published from anyone, but overall I think the source is fairly legitimate.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it. So with that number in mind, assuming that number can't grow, and I want to talk about that as well, because assuming that number can't grow, your point is, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people, in order to make a subscription-based service work, this is where Sean was coming from, in order to make a $60 or $70 product work that is budgeted for AAA status, sooner than later, you're going to need that number to grow. That ceiling can't stay there, or something's going to have to give, correct?
Yes, it absolutely has to give, and I think part of what I alluded to is, to a degree, something has already given, which is, if you look back during like PS2 era, right, that's kind of what I would say is almost the golden age of gaming, where you're starting to get high production games, but you're seeing a wide variety of games, right? RPG fans will say, you know what, there was countless RPGs for me to play then, or shooters, or just whatever off the beat, game, they existed then.
Yeah.
And today, you're not going to find that as much because, again, if a game is going to cost $100 million, $150, or even $50 million, right? You better make sure that that game actually sells. And so you can't start taking these wild bets anymore in terms of trying new things. You got to kind of go a little bit of the safe route. And again, I'll put it out there. I'm a big sucker for sequels. So again, don't get me wrong. I'm not on the bandwagon of, we don't need another Call of Duty game. If people are buying it, why wouldn't you make it? If people are buying Horizon, why wouldn't you make it? This is a business after all.
Sure.
But that's turning into a cyclical thing, right? Where it's like, if it's the same thing, then you're also not getting new people to come into the industry. And so you just kind of go round and round with it.
Right. And what I think is interesting, though, is because I don't agree with you on, and maybe you just didn't slide this phrase in there, but if you're talking about console only, or big budget only, you're absolutely right. Your assessment that there are less chances being taken and things are getting more conservative, absolutely right. I do think if you look at the indie space, you are seeing just a wealth of creativity, but of course it is lining up with the fact that those games are not big financial roll of the dice, right? So the real question becomes is when I say something's got to give, to me, it's either going to be, and tell me if you agree with this, I mean, whether or not subscription services, okay, it's either going to be that subscription services, simply, if they only focus on games that core gamers like, will never be able to reach escape velocity because you have to break that 300 million ceiling. It's going to be that you see less and less and less AAA games, because if you don't break that 300 million ceiling, but the budgets keep going up, you're not going to be able to make enough profit, and it won't be worth the risk. I mean, it's kind of, you know, or you're going to see production values drop. I mean, it's one of those three things, correct?
It's absolutely one of those things. And I think first, going back to what you're saying, you are seeing a lot of creative indie games today. And I think less of them tend to be on console, right? If you pull up your iPhone and you go to the App Store, whether it's on Apple Arcade or just anything else,
yep,
you're seeing a big breadth of just all different kinds of games. And it's because those games can sometimes be made by a single person or a 5-man or a 10-man team, right?
Right.
So they can afford to take some of those moonshots with their games. And I think part of the theory initially with a lot of the gaming consoles, and PlayStation started this around the PS3 era under KOZ, was, hey, can we release our games, you know, in some kind of way, especially our older back catalog, on mobile to get these people to eventually come to console gaming? And so I think no one has successfully been able to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think, first of all, you know, when we're talking about this discussion, we need to know that this is specifically to console gaming and these AAA games and their future on that, and not so much the gaming industry as a whole.
Right.
That a lot of times, right, you know, people don't talk about mobile as part of the gaming industry, but the reality is that it is part of it.
It's bigger than the console side, but it's not just mobile though. If you look, to me, I was referring more to Steam, because I love Apple Arcade because it doesn't have the shitty monetization. The standard mobile games, as big as they are, I still think they're a fucking wasteland. But Apple Arcade, I think, is legit. I've played a shit ton of games on those, on that subservice. But I'm talking more about what you see on something like Steam, or when indies come to Game Pass or come to PlayStation. But okay, so, and this really leads to the bigger question, right, to me, which is the real big question as a designer and somebody who loves the medium, is, you know, why can't, and I don't think it can, by the way, I have a theory, but why can't that 300 million threshold be broken? Like, because let me show you, I don't know if you're looking at your stream right now, but if anybody who's looking at your stream, so this figure from Sean Layden, let's be conservative. Let's say on the low end, he's being, you know, he's not being aggressive enough. Let's say it's 150 million, and on the high end, he should be more aggressive. So 150 to 500 million people. I don't think that's right. Let's assume he's got the numbers right, but that's where he's coming in. That's how many people are playing console-based video games, okay? These are how many people went to the movies and bought a ticket. This is just a movie theater. This is not a watching on Netflix or DVD or streaming. This is going to a theater. 1,228,000,000 people went to buy a ticket in 2019. Obviously, 2020 is an edge case because of the pandemic. But you're well up into the 1.x billion number of people who are actually consuming movies. And I go back to, ultimately, it may be, as I've said before, games just may never be able to get that escape velocity because they're asking more of the audience than I think your average person wants to give. When they come home from a day at work, they want to sit down and they want to watch a sitcom, or they want to sit down and they want to watch Law and Order, or they want to sit down and maybe fuck around on Amazon. But I think the minute you start asking people to engage with the video game, especially a video game that requires you to read a map and learn controls and all of this, I mean, I don't think that 300 million threshold's ever going away. I mean, do you think I'm wrong?
No, and I think that's actually the more interesting part of the conversation, right? Is that if we are stuck at this number, and at the same time, you know, we take into what every developer is saying is that games are getting longer to make and more costly to make, and we're not suddenly willing to make a game, you know, from $60 to $100 in terms of what we charge the consumer. What do the big three do in order to move the industry forward? And I think that's the real big problem with console gaming, is that no one is thinking outside of their core demographic, right? Everyone wants to market to the same people. Everyone wants to make the same type of games, right? And so you end up inviting basically no one new. So Steam is doing interesting stuff, right? But is someone who's not a gamer going to really consider, oh, let me go buy a PC or let me go build a PC so I can play one of these games?
Yes.
No, they'll just pull out their iPhone, look at the App Store, and
right?
Like, hey, what's new on there, right?
Right, but I think, yeah, I mean, then you're getting into that other space, and maybe a title like Fall Guys, maybe a title like Among Us, really are the titles to be looking at. Even though I know a lot of core gamers, which really is everybody who's listening to us talk right now, would want to shoot us in the fucking head. And I'm not saying I want all games to be like Among Us, which I have no problem with. I just, but ultimately, when you've got Ocasio-Cortez going online and playing this, when you've got parents playing with their kids during the pandemic on this, it's indicative of a sweet spot of the joy of interactivity without the pain in the ass of any kind of real meaningful challenge. And I think that's, somebody in the chat right now, we have Horizons Event saying, where did he go? No, actually it was Brian. He says, I think it grows slowly. Children of console gamers will also game on console if they are there. That hasn't been my experience. I think the reality is most people don't want, their entertainment to be as challenging as a video game. I mean, and if you look at something like Among Us or a cell phone game or whatever, it's more of a relaxer. It's just like, I'll fucking play a little bit of Candy Crush and go to bed. So, I mean,
I totally buy into that, because I'll kind of give you another example of it. It's not direct, but, you and I grew up on an era where having a big TV was the big thing, right? You wanted to have a big screen TV in your house, right?
Yep.
And now most kids growing up, if they have an iPad, they'll just prefer to watch that, right? They'll jump in their room, they'll grab their iPad, they'll curl up in bed and watch something on that.
That's right.
Them, there isn't this lure of having a giant TV, where for me, I'm like, man, I remember when I got my 70-inch TV, and I remember like, ooh, there's 80-inch and 90-inch TVs, and that excites me, but I'm also wary enough that I don't represent the younger generation anymore. And again, I'm 35, so I'm not that old.
Right.
But I look at them and I'm like, man, they look and view at this stuff very differently than I do. And so it's like, I grew up gaming my entire life, and I pick up a DualSense and I'm like, hey man, this is a neat controller. But if I put that down in front of someone who's maybe casually gamed, right?
Yeah.
And say, hey man, go play this new game, go play the Avengers game, go play Destiny, go play, Ghost of Tsushima. And they need to now sit here and do the first 5 hours to figure out what the hell the controls are. They walk away for 2 weeks, come back, don't remember all the intricate combinations that they need to do to just parry an attack. They're never going to game with that, right? Where they can, pick up their iPad, be entertained for half an hour, and then move on with their life.
That's right.
That's the problem.
Well, I mean, it's the problem if you basically think that you have to find a way to sustain the current AAA game market. Look, gamers will have no choice unless they want to fund this shit themselves. Well, hardcore gamers are going to have no choice. Unless this ceiling grows, you're getting less and less and less of these AAA games as the years roll on. You just simply are. Or they're going to become so service-based that you're not going to recognize them as the console games that you say that you love. And so you're going to get a drop in production value as these companies scatter, because it's only so long before a big company looks at a company like the guys making Among Us or the guys making Roblox and says, why are we making these games for 180, 250 million dollars when we could be spending a lot less money and making a lot more profit? I mean, there's only so long that the answer is, because we know how to speak to this market. I mean, eventually speaking to that market, the safety of that market is not going to be big enough to sustain the increase in prices. So
yeah, I mean, think of it this way, right? You work on a game like Uncharted for 5 years, right? And then there's a game like Clash of Clans, which makes double the profits you do at any given time, right? And
more than that.
Studio, like that's got to be soul crushing, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, man, I worked on this, what I consider a masterpiece, and you put out basically just this battle royale kind of type game, and that's it, and you're just eating my lunch.
Right, and to be fair, it's more than double the profit. I mean, some of these games, some of the mobile games right now are making $500,000 a month in profit. It's staggering. Yep. It's staggering.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Okay.
And so I think ultimately it really kind of comes back to this for us within the gaming industry, the hardcore fans that saying no, like we love our consoles, whether it's ultimately through streaming or subscription, all that kind of that's irrelevant, right? We want these big blockbuster games, and I think we need to look and say, how is it that we can invite more people into our industry?
Well, I think
part of it.
Go ahead.
Is from the hardware. I think part of it is from the hardware makers, but I think that another part of it too is, can we redefine what games kind of mean, right? Because if you look at the gaming industry right now, there's certain genres that we start labeling everything under, right? Like you have shooter genre, and you have racing sims, and you have sport games, and you have RPGs. And the minute you say that, you kind of know what that is, right? But if you look at movies, they're defined much more subtly, right? You have these overall genres, but there's a lot more that goes into them. And if we start looking at the gaming industry and say, hey, can we make different types of experience that maybe it still is a shooter, but maybe it doesn't need to be an intricate game like a Call of Duty, and it can be something more gentle where someone can jump in, enjoy it, whether it's more of, hey, you get to view this game through a story mode, and you just sit back and enjoy it for 5 hours, 10 hours, and the game almost plays itself. Or maybe you get to start having different sub-experiences in these vast worlds that they're building on these amazing engines. Can we utilize those to now grow the industry beyond what we would define as this is a shooter, and you and I immediately know what it is?
Well, I think I'll be honest with you. I think that sounds good, and it's certainly not the first I've heard people say that. I think what's really difficult about that synopsis or that thesis is that it makes this assumption that everybody wants what they feel when they interact with something. And I think the minute, like you're saying, a game that almost plays itself, but it's also a shooter. At that point, you have to then ask, what is so joyful about what you're providing in that game that would trump someone else going, I'll just go watch an action movie then. I'll just go watch the latest F9, Fast and the Furious movie. It's like, why, at that point, why have interactivity at all? It's like you may not be able to separate from interactivity the very thing that pushes people away, which is challenge, or which is not difficulty, but mental engagement at a level that requires more effort than just sitting back in a chair and watching a show. That becomes like, I'm thinking of Amy Hennig, and I know she was talking to Tim Schafer a few years ago about what she's doing at Skydance. And at first, I know she was talking a lot about like Bandersnatch and figuring out ways to make games more accessible, kind of very much like what you're saying. And then lately, though, I've seen that company has started to hire, and I don't know what they're making, so I don't really know if this is accurate. But the people that they're hiring now, it's like high-end animators, people who know Unreal, super senior tech people. They're hiring people that look like they're hiring for a AAA game or a game. Like they may have tried it and realized we can't make this work, because how many times have there been, choose your own adventure games and simple games and all that. And, it's like, if it's not Candy Crush, people would probably just rather watch a fucking movie. I think ultimately it's going to happen, but it is technology. I think when we get the holodeck, I think the whole world will become fucking addicted. But until that time comes,
right? That's that kind of thing in the future of like, will there be a VR or a holodeck type thing where anyone can just jump in these things, right, and do their, you are now part of the game. And I think that's interesting, but certainly probably not a you and I lifetime thing. No,
I think so. I think you're right.
Is how do we get there? Because if the answer is that we're not able to grow the gaming industry in terms of the ways that you and I are talking.
Just so we're clear, you mean the AAA or console gaming industry. You don't mean, because the industry itself is doing great, but it's not mostly, but a lot of it's mobile. A lot of it's kind of simple games, right? I mean,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely, yes. When I talk about it, it is specific to kind of the console gaming and the hardcore AAA games that we're talking about.
Right.
And so then the other answer must be, how do we lower the cost of these games? And I think that's actually something that is happening a little bit on the film side. For the longest time, they wanted to make a Star Wars TV show, and this is way too expensive. It's just never going to work, right?
Right.
And now we're finally gotten to the point with Mandalorian that they have the technology, right, where they're able to do that. And so the question is, will gaming have some kind of moment like that where production suddenly gets dramatically cheaper for these games? And I think that's one of those conversations. Again, maybe you know about this a little bit more than I do, David, but I feel like a lot of times when games start, whether it's a brand new title or whether it's a sequel, you go in, you look at the assets that you previously created, and oftentimes it's restarting everything from scratch. And so an interesting thing that I heard is so often in gaming, you're just reinventing how to create the same box, the same chest, the same this and same that. And so the question is, are there smarter ways that we can develop these games so that the production time lowers and therefore the cost of that game lowers?
I'm sure there are, but at that point, the film analogy only really works if you have what film has, which is screenplays, right? I mean, yes, there are ways, and this is happening all the time. I mean, even when I was working on games 3 years ago, there was I forget what it was called. It was like Houdini or something. There was a new package that you could learn, and we sent one of our artists to learn it. That basically, it almost like it just applied the texture maps without you having to even go in, and you had to go in and tweak it. But it was so much faster. All of that's happening, and that will continue to happen. But ultimately, the hard part of this is that either the AAA games are, one of the reasons they're AAA is because they are pushing the boundaries of technology, right? So if you, and gamers, at least the hardcore gamers, seem to care about that in terms of the ones that care about not pure gameplay like I do, but visual polish. So there was a great video that Naughty Dog put out about their animation system in The Last of Us Part 2. Well, I can go off the shelf and make a game in Unity, or I can make a game in Unreal where the animation looks great. But it's not going to look as good as what Naughty Dog has because it's proprietary. Now, in about a year and a half, that will probably get something similar will get folded into Unreal. But ultimately, if you value these AAA games because they are bleeding edge, and I know a lot of people do who buy these games, I think the more assembly line you make the process, the harder it becomes to check the box of, wow, you've never seen production like this before. And then the other part of it is just games are, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm going to bring it up on the screen, but this I thought this was fascinating. This is Nintendo's Game Builder Garage, which came out recently, right? Which is sort of like their version of Dreams, which lets you make video games on the Switch. Okay, well, it's the exact same thing that happened with Dreams, which is it basically shows the real problem with video games or any art form is that it's incredibly hard to make something compelling and fun. So as some of the best creations, Kotaku has basically singled out what you would expect, people who have gone in and basically made games that already exist, but they've made it in this engine. So there's a Super Hot ripoff, there's a Sonic ripoff, there's a PT ripoff, there's a Mario Kart, there's a GTA, there's a Doom Eternal. All of these are simply using tools to make something that someone else has already done the heavy lifting on in order to create, a copycat version of the game. And so I think part of it is an expectation of budget that the assembly line thing is not going to bring. Part of it is the fact that unlike movies where you can read a screenplay and go, oh, there's no guarantee this movie's going to be good, but that's a goddamn good story. We know what we're doing. A lot of these games start and halfway through it's like, well, shit, this isn't fun. We got to change all kinds of shit. So it's I don't know, man.
The pivot in games tends to be very different. I would almost say in terms of films, the closest thing it is this happens a lot in Pixar films where I feel like nearly all their masterpieces halfway through, they're like, you know what? It's not working and we need to change this film. And I think that's when they get the best work done, right?
I think so.
But that then adds to your cost.
It adds to your cost, and or it adds to the crunch. It's like you can't get everything. Sorry, it's not going to happen. Let me get some of these chats. You tell me what you think. Okay, there's a guy in the chat who says, Geraldo Rivera, not the same one, might be. He says, the people that spend $70 on God of War are not the same people spending hundreds of dollars on Roblox. That argument, Roblox, right? That argument is dumb, LOL. I would say that this guy doesn't understand what we're talking about, because we're not suggesting that the people spending $70 on God of War are the same people spending money on Robux. But you can guarantee that when Sony looks at the money that Robux makes and looks at the money that God of War makes and the profit of each, Sony goes, well, the games are different, but the money's the same. Why the fuck are we spending all this money on Ragnarok? We could just fucking go make our own version of Robux. I mean, would you agree with that? That if something doesn't give, why would these big companies continue drinking from this well when there's a much more lucrative well that's cheaper?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because again, I guarantee you it didn't take them 5 years to make that game, right? They didn't need to bring in amazing composers and this and that, right?
There was no performance capture, any of that stuff. Yeah.
There's not potentially towards the end of the game 500 plus people working on that, where I guarantee, once God of War is coming to a finish or the next Horizon's coming in, right? You're upping that staff to make sure you're finishing everything towards that, finish line. And so, yeah, why would you do all that? So at the end of the day, maybe 2 years later, you can walk away with $100 million profit versus
a $40 billion IPO, which is,
Exactly, right? And I think that this also taps into another interesting thing, too, is a game like that, right, kind of escapes the gaming industry and more people hear about it, right?
Yeah.
It's a game that parents may hear about, right?
I knew all about it because my kids were all about it.
Exactly, right? A game even like Candy Crush, right, as a generic example, is a game that your grandmother knows about it. And it almost has a cultural impact.
That's right.
And I think one of the interesting things that I've noticed is, you and I and everyone in this chat have played some of the games that I think have spectacular storylines and beautiful musical scores to them that you and I will be humming for years on, right? You're in the shower and you're like, what the hell? Like, I'm singing a song from Xenogears that I played, in 1998. Like, what is happening with me, right?
Right.
But beyond that, games don't break outside of the gaming industry, right?
Every now and then, you've got Fortnite, you've got GTA, but yes, it is very rare when it breaks outside and enters the normal cultural zeitgeist. That's true.
Yeah, but why is it, though, that these games that we love, that we consider masterpieces, for the most part, don't have a cultural impact outside of the hardcore industry, right? Hardcore gamers. And I think, again, that plays into what you're saying, though, right? Where, again, Sony will look at it and why would it spend this much money? Or Microsoft, I think they're in a very interesting situation, and I have no inside information on this, but from everything that I've read, it doesn't seem like Xbox has ever been green for Microsoft, right? They've never made money off of Xbox, and they've always dumped money into it. And at what point does Microsoft start getting tired with them and saying, why are we dumping just billions of dollars into you guys? What is the point of us investing all this money where we don't need to make another console? We don't need to go in this direction. We don't need another, Halo from us when we can be investing in different types of experiences and games and be making a lot more money along the way.
Well, think about this. I mean, and this is, you and I have been a video game executive, but I was never a very good executive. Much better designer than executive, right? So, and I don't think you have ever been a executive other than your own website and things like that. I'm not belittling you or I. I'm just saying that I guarantee you, or I would be stunned that if people at Microsoft that are MBAs and super pros and all they do is look at numbers and analyze numbers all day, if they're looking at all the money they're spending, the many billions of dollars they're spending on Game Pass and the acquisitions of studios, and they are not trying to tackle the issue we're talking about, which is the budgets keep going up, but the ceiling of the people who call themselves core gamers is not rising. And you don't think that that information is filtering into product development in terms of course we want to keep making Halo, of course we want to keep making Forza, but we have got to grow the market. Now, I don't know how they're going to do it, but these people have to be thinking of that. Or they're fucking morons. I mean, there's no way they're fucking morons. These are people who go to business school for this shit.
You know, I think they're thinking of it, but I think one of the things that we don't see, I think especially on the Microsoft side, is that they may be doing the equation a little bit different. And again, now we're starting to kind of get in the weeds of stuff, but a long time ago, when MP4 cameras were starting to come out, I don't know if you remember the flip camera. But
sure, absolutely. Before iPhone, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? Before then, Flip kind of made the premiere like, hey man, you buy one of these, you just hit record what you want, plug it into your computer and upload it. And then Flip eventually disappeared, and so people are like, what happened to that company? Cisco bought out Flip with the hope of, hey man, if we buy them out, dump money into these guys, they're going to grow exponentially, and then people are going to want to share their videos. This is going to require back-end infrastructure for them, and who are they going to come to? They're going to come to Cisco. And so that was their entire game plan for buying Flip and then eventually burying the company and killing it, was they never actually cared about that market. They wanted to grow their own infrastructure play. And so I look at Microsoft and I wonder, with everything they're doing, and especially now that, you know, that they're pushing less and less into consoles, right? Their whole thing is cloud, cloud, cloud.
Right.
Well, what's the big bet that Microsoft has right now? They're trying to get into the cloud space and to become a premier cloud provider. And what better way to flex that than through showcasing what they can do through their own streaming networks and through their own streaming platforms and so on and so forth. And so that's why I wonder, for Microsoft, if that's been their play, of why they're allowing all these big bets to happen with Xbox and spending these types of money on it.
Right. I've never thought of that, but yeah, I mean, that certainly seems like you could make a scenario that seems possible that would exist. That's interesting for sure. Let me get some other chats in here. We got Solid Snake. Thank you for the super chat, buddy. He says, Jaffe, do video games now have bigger budgets than films or vice versa? And what would you consider a typical ballpark figure to create a super detailed game like Red Dead 2? So what I will tell you is, I mean, obviously it depends on the game, depends on the movie. But if you're talking about a movie like Avengers Endgame, and if somebody out there wants to Google it and hit me back, I would appreciate it. My guess is Avengers Endgame probably was a budget of about 320 million production budget. That may be way high, but anywhere between 200 and 300. I know Sony video games first party have been coming in at over 180 million, or at least some of them have, not all of them for sure. Returnal is not a $120+ million game at all, but some of the big ones, and I want to say that Red Dead is somebody, if you Google how much did Red Dead cost, I want to say there's an estimate that game was $500 million. I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds like I'm fucking an idiot and I'm lying and I read something wrong and I didn't know where the comma went with the zeros, but I'm almost certain that I saw that figure. In fact, fuck it, I'm going to Google it right now. 1 second. How much did Red Dead, here we go, cost to make? And they say...
And David, one thing too, though, that's worth taking into account, though, is when you're sometimes reading these numbers, whether it's for the gaming industry or movies, is that 400 million that you may hear, 300 million.
I don't think...
Is that just production,
yeah,
or is that marketing as well? Because that can dramatically...
No, I know. Yeah, they usually say you add 30 or 40% to prints and advertising, but I think that was budget, but I'll look it up. So these guys are saying, this is Dean Takahashi saying that Red Dead 2 was a $300 million title was his assessment, was $300 million. Let's see how much did Avengers Endgame cost to make, and let's see if they break up the prints. So it was a $356 million budget. It was one of the most expensive movies ever made. Again, I'm assuming, I don't know where they're getting the budget regarding prints and advertising. I have no idea, but that's the number that's coming in. So, you know, it's comparable depending on how big you want to go. Okay, let me get a couple more of these chats in. I appreciate you guys spending your ducats, your hard-earned ducats. Thank you, fellas. Ratchet says, important input. After watching lots of young gamers grow up with my family, what I found is that we have a lot of light and heavy engagement games, but none of the middle games for users to play. That's interesting, but I don't know what that means. I think a heavy engagement game we've already talked about, that would be like The Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima. A light engagement game would be something like, Candy Crush. I've never really heard, what's a middle game? Do you know what that would be?
Could you say something like Ratchet and Clank is middle?
No, because your point, I think, is one of the most valid points, which is that controller is intimidating.
The mechanic is absolutely...
I love that fucking game. It's phenomenal. But the fact that you have to open up a weapon wheel, and then you can have 3 layers of the weapon wheel, and you can collect bolts, or you can collect this raranium or whatever. You can either level up your weapons, or you can... buy new weapons with a different currency. No, I think thematically it's medium, but mechanically it's certainly not a medium level game. I'm sure Ratchet, there's something out there you could find that would fit that, but I wonder. Let me ask you this: what do you think of what Tallarico's doing with the Amico? He clearly is trying to get more people to game that currently reject it. Have you spent any real time looking into what that is? I've played it, I've been down there, but do you have any experience with it?
No, I find the practice of it interesting, but overall, no. I just don't know enough about it to make a call one way or another of, will it work? Is what he's trying to achieve even feasible? I just don't know. But there's also another interesting console that's, if you want to call it a console, are you familiar with Playdate?
Yeah, that's kind of gimmicky, right? But you're right. It's if you don't know Playdate, I'll put it up on the screen. Playdate is this thing that's coming out, I think they said in August, is that right? They just announced today. Playdate,
yep.
And it's the thing with the little crank, and you're right, for someone like me, it's a total gimmick. But you're right, if you could just give that to some just non-gamer dude and say, oh, you just fucking crank this thing up and you play these fun little dumb games, and they don't really take much time, and they're not going to be like, The Last of Us, but it's still a game. It's kind of a cool thing. One thing that I've noticed in the chat, though, people are saying that Sony is trying to do things of catering to people outside of, your typical hardcore gamers. Seeing it, right? Because to me, the last time anyone did something interesting to really get non-gamers into the gaming industry was Nintendo with the Wii, right? Correct.
They had their motion controllers, and that's when they also equally sold a buttload of them. Now, I think equally a buttload of them after the novelty wore off just sat there and collected dust. So, whether that was a success or not, I don't know. I think not. But Nintendo at least tried that. VR, again, kind of gives that same premise, but I don't think the games are there. The hardware's too complicated, too expensive, so on and so forth. So then I just don't know what these examples are of Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony doing anything other than doubling down on the hardcore gamers.
I think, and I'm a relatively articulate fellow, but I'm not so articulate that I could, what I want to say, and I'm going to give it a shot. I don't think I'd have to spend a lot of time working the language to communicate this, but I'm going to try. But I do think there is a fundamental disconnect that the production value of games have given people a false understanding of how far interactivity in the gaming front can go. Because I really do think there is something to the fact that your average person, it's almost like if you could measure mental engagement or energy, which you can, I just don't know how it's done. The amount of mental engagement people want to put into things, especially things that are not work or they're not taking care of their family or whatever, but are just for entertainment. I think maybe because the games are starting to look like movies and have stories like movies and things like that, we make this assumption that they should be able to connect with as many people as movies do. But I think the fact that they're interactive at their core puts a barrier up for a lot of people. Not that they aren't capable, but they're like, if I've got an hour and a half to chill on a Sunday, I don't want to work that hard. I don't want to do that, and I don't know if that's ever solvable any more than it's solvable to get people into crossword puzzles who don't want to do crossword puzzles because it's too much work. They'd rather just watch the football game, and nothing's wrong with that. It's just, I think we're talking about, this is kind of a high brain activity. It's not a high brain, like you got to be a fucking Mensa member, but it's not as simple as somebody who's just like, I just want to watch, sitcoms all day.
Yep. And I think part of that, though, is that because games are this complicated now, or this sophisticated, I should say, right?
Right.
Because of how much interactivity they allow.
I don't think so. I think that's part of it, of course. And I think that can improve, and in improving it, perhaps the ceiling gets raised. But I also think part of it is, even if you're talking about if you're talking about Angry Birds, or you're talking about Wii U, or not Wii U, the Wii controller, ultimately, it's a novelty to most people who don't really get into the weeds with games. It's like, oh, this is fun. I'm pulling the thing back and shooting the bird, and I did that. Oh, how do I get 100? Oh, I got 100. Okay, now, but I don't want to spend my life getting 100 and finishing the game. I'm going to move on now and go talk to my sister who's in Iowa, and she wants to know about her wedding dress. I mean, it's like your average person isn't engaged at that level, I find. And I just don't think that's solvable at the level that has been solved for movies. I mean, you even know this, right? You know this because, the ceiling that you talk about, that Sean Layden talks about, like I read a great book a while ago about sort of the beginnings of Hollywood. And when they opened the first Nickelodeons, which were the things you put like a nickel in or a penny in, and you watched a little 20-second movie, you couldn't keep people out of the arcades. It was instantly a huge, massive hit amongst all types of people. Games and video games specifically have been around. Everybody likes to say it's a young medium, but games have been around now for 50 years. It's not like, it's ever really, other than the novelty stuff, kind of busted into the zeitgeist. So let me get these last ones. All right, well, we're going to move on, but buddy, call back anytime. It is great to hear from you. I'm glad you're doing well. If you ever want to call back in and talk about other things, let me know, and I will put you on. I would love to have you on again, man. It was good talking to you.
Hey, absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening to us ramble. Two old men rambling.
There you go. Yeah, well, I'm old. You're posing. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon.
All right, man.
All right. Let me get these super chats. Deus M, thank you, buddy. He says, this is like when Martin Scorsese called the MCU theme park movies Fortnite, Roblox, Minecraft are the theme parks of games and probably have the highest conversion rates of turning casuals to gamers. Well, yeah, but see, the difference is, though, you're not wrong, but the difference is, though, is if you ask Scorsese, and I don't mean The Irishman, but if you look at the kind of movies, because Scorsese can't get his movies made in traditional ways anymore. If you look at the movies that are not the theme park movies that he is talking about, he's talking more and more about lower budget indie movies. He's talking about art house movies. He's talking about Oscar bait movies. And those don't get the same budgets. So it is a bit of an inverse thing there, though, where right now a lot of the big budgets go to these games that are not that The Last of Us is comparable to a Scorsese film, but it's one of the closest things we've got to something that aspires to maybe a higher level of expression of a certain or a level of a type of expression that is a higher level of thinking than just what we're used to in a lot of AAA games. Those are the games that are costing a lot now, which I do think is part of the problem. Every other art form, I've talked about this before, it's flipped. The really engaging, interesting, strange stuff for the aficionados, that's the stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money. The real simple, easy, smooth brain experience, that's the stuff they spend the ducats on. And we have the reverse of that in video games. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Ratchet says, thank you, buddy. He says, you're forgetting market section. It's easy to leave AAA and go into low-cost game making. It's hard to succeed and impossible to come back once you do. I don't know. I mean, you're saying a couple of things. It's easy to leave AAA, sure. It's easy to go into low-cost game making, sure. It's hard to succeed. Yeah, it's hard to... Sure, that's true. And impossible to come back once you do. That's the one I don't agree with. I know people who have gone to indie games, crashed and burned, and now they're like art directors and leads on massive AAA games. But if you're basically talking, though, about why would these big companies jump into making games like Among Us because it's so much harder to succeed? I would have to imagine that they would say, they would apply the same level of marketing and PR and market analysis before they pull triggers. And yeah, maybe every game's not going to be an Among Us, but you can roll 50 dice of Among Us attempts that will make you way more money than rolling the same cost of a die roll for something like a God of War or a Last of Us, basically. All right, let me get this one, and then I want to get to another. Let me get to a call, then I'll get to another topic. 1 second, fellas. I'm sorry. Feels weird giving money to a self-admitted racist, says Johnny. I'm sorry, baby, but at least I'm honest about it. And please, if you're watching this and you think, if you think what I think I'm saying, I'm not. I say it because it's inflammatory, because it's meant to get people to open up a discussion. I wouldn't say Last of Us should be considered an art house project. It's a theme park, but the subject is more mature, but still is the stagnant design from Metal Gear. Still, Ren, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying, though, in terms of in AAA, it is a game, or The Last of Us 2, or God of War, that attempts to deal with deeper themes than a game, for example, like Infamous Second Son, right? That's all I'm saying. Okay. Let us move forward in our conversation. People hate on Nintendo, says Bryce. I certainly don't. I love Nintendo. But they're making major bank on not so powerful hardware and making money with each sale and millions on software. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So I don't want to see 50 Among Us games from Sony. I'd rather see 10 AAA games. Bacon, I know. No one is saying a lot of people watching this stream won't like this. I didn't say Last of Us. Oh, you're not saying I said it flopped. No one is saying that. I understand. But, I would rather be able to go into space without it costing $600,000 to book a flight with Richard Branson. But currently doesn't. Ratchet says, I watched a video of you from 2011, mate. You've aged. So have you, motherfucker. That was 10 years ago. Although, to be perfectly fair, the beard, the white beard adds a lot. Somebody was saying to me they watched a video of me from even like 3 months ago when I didn't have a beard. And they're like, my God, you look 30 years younger. So a lot of it's the white beard. I was actually thinking I should color it. Not like, I don't want to like make it look young. But it's so white that maybe I'll make it purple or blue or something just to be stupid. That would be kind of fun. Red Dead 2 is one of the best-selling games of all time, and at the first time it's really slow, more emotional. I find it curious because gamers probably wouldn't like it if it wasn't a game. Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, let us move forward with our conversation. Okay. We talked about that. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about this. This is what I want to talk about. Let me actually bring in Tripster first, and then we're going to talk about what EA is doing. Those wacky sons of bitches. Okay. Yeah, Tone says that's how time works. You get older. That's right. I don't want to look young. Somebody says use just for men to get looking young. Why would I want that? I have no desire to not look how old I am. I don't give a fuck. But I think because, my kids are always saying they want to color their hair, but they have dark hair. And they're like, yeah, but I would have to bleach it first. And I'm like, oh, I have the perfect color that I could just go wild with this fucking thing. All right. Here we go. Let me bring in Tripster. Tripster, are you there, pal? What's going on?
Hey, Jeffy, how's it going? Thank you for having me on.
Of course. It's going great. What's up?
All right, so I feel like when it comes to this topic, we're talking about whether or not the future of gaming can be balanced with mobile interests and things like that. Can we get the casual gamers interested in gaming? I'm looking at joining the game industry myself, and I'm actually having to answer this question because I'm thinking, like, if I'm going to make a game, I'm going to appeal to casuals for a mobile market, how would I do such a thing? And I think when you're thinking about it, you kind of get into a situation where you want to balance making the game for people who actually play video games, but then you also have to make it fun for people who aren't used to playing video games. And you can't sacrifice one audience for the other. But I think there's a balance you can have where you can have games that are for big gamers, and there are movies. Think about it like this: you have movies that are meant for famous. They're fun. They're not really cinematic. You go there, you think about it for 5 seconds or 2 seconds, and it's just it's an action flick. Things like that where you're not really meant to think about it, like cheap horror flicks or cheap film flicks. Where certain people have niche audiences, but there are also a lot of films that are much more niche. That it costs big budget. And I think you're seeing like say you have Christopher.
Give me an example of a big budget film that's niche.
Right. So if you think about say Christopher Nolan's films, or you're talking about Martin Scorsese's films, not everyone's looking to see a film that's super deep or super emotional, right? And so they have huge budgets.
Well, hang on. Let's be clear. So Christopher Nolan's movies are meant to be blockbusters. No one at Warner Brothers funded Interstellar or Tenet or what was the one about dreams? What the fuck was that thing? Inversion or Inception. They didn't fund that. They did say, hey, if you make Batman, we'll give you this. But those aren't small movies that are meant to appeal to art house audience. Those are still big fucking movies.
Oh yeah, they're still big movies for sure. But at the same time, they're not say as wide appeal as say the Avengers. There are certain films that if you're thinking about it, they're not as wide appeal for most people. And not everyone's going to want to go watch a Christopher Nolan film. I love Christopher Nolan myself. I love Martin Scorsese, Wolf of Wall Street. Those are great films, but they're not, say, Avengers or Avatar, where it's just a giant spectacle. You go in there and you enjoy.
And those are getting harder to get made. The only reason that Irishman was on Netflix is they were the only one that would fund it.
Exactly, and so you're talking about streaming services, and I think when you're talking about the industry as a whole, I think when it looks at it, I think Sony's got they're trying to lock down the big blockbuster market. I think Microsoft has tried to do blockbusters, and it hasn't necessarily worked with them. So they've had a lot more success with gaming as a service, and that might actually address this question that we're asking: can you make a video game for casuals and hardcore gamers? Of course, but it's not as likely as you mentioned. You talk about how it's very rare for a video game to get into the zeitgeist. When you're appealing to hardcore gamers, you're appealing to a certain niche. It's like, certain comic book characters are going to be more popular with people who actually read comic books. But, there are certain characters that everyone knows, right? Not every single comic book character or comic book villain is going to be known by every single person. But you can have stories, you can have games, you can have movies, you can have shows that are geared to a more wide audience while not also giving up these big AAA games. I think if you're looking at the Xbox strategy, or the Nintendo strategy. Nintendo is doing it with a hardware situation where they're trying to design their games for innovative hardware, and that's their niche. That's their stated.
I got bored. I'm so sorry. Isn't that terrible? I love you, buddy. I love you so much, but I got bored of that conversation. Is that me? Was that just me? I am so sorry. I get your point, Tripster. I appreciate it, buddy. I appreciate you calling in. Call back anytime, but I couldn't do that one anymore. Isn't that terrible? God, I'm an asshole. I don't mean to be an asshole. I'm actually a nice fella. But it was just too much. It was too much, Tripster. It's too much for my old man's brain. Sorry, bud. I'm sorry. Okay. I know I'm rude. I don't mean to be rude. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm so sorry. I just got bored. But Tripster, call back anytime. You are always welcome, sir. I know it was rude, Wolfblood. Hey, Eddie Torres says, I got bored too. I was on eBay during that time. Hey, look. It's not... look. I have to make sure people want to keep watching. Sorry, Tripster. Call back, though, buddy, for something else. Let's move on. Let's talk about FIFA. And I don't play FIFA. I don't give a fuck about FIFA. But I do find this story fascinating. This is a story... this is really interesting. Because if you read Kotaku's reporting on it, they talk about FIFA's loot boxes can now be previewed before you buy. And this guy, John Walker, who sounds like an action hero, is basically writing his article about, well, it's about time, and there was all this controversy. And can you believe, he's very dismissive of loot boxes, and it's kind of like, thank God. Okay. And a lot of people agree with that. A lot of people agree with that, and that's fine. I just give you a sense of where I'm coming from. Oh, shut up, Adversary One. Adversary One could have just said he had to go. Yeah, I know. But why would you want me to lie to you? It was a boring call. Why would you want me to lie to you? Goodness. Listen to me. Point of this, though, sir, is that I like loot boxes. I like them in toys. I like them in baseball cards. I like them in movie cards. I've never had a problem with them. I've never thought, even if they do slide into a definition, even if you slide into a definition of gambling, it doesn't bother me. Right? Gambling, it's like, yes, gambling is bad for some people. A lot of things are bad for some people. And we should make sure people are aware of what they are so we don't run the risk of bringing people in that aren't able to handle it. But I don't want to throw all these great things. You know, alcohol, I'm not an alcoholic, thank God. I know I'm a foodaholic. I'm a stressaholic, but I'm not an alcoholic. And so I don't want like alcohol to go away. I don't want weed to go away. So I don't have a problem with these, okay? But a lot of people do. I respect that. I understand. Oh, shut up, Opzar. It was rude. There are better ways to end a conversation. Come on, man. Look. Let me tell you what's rude. I'm going to get back to this FIFA thing. Let me tell you what's rude, though. We currently have about 350 to 330 people watching this stream. What's more rude? What's more rude? Me allowing a conversation to go on that my feeling is it's getting boring and might turn those people watching off. It's more rude to disrespect them so I can be polite to a guy who's droning on and on and on. And I told the guy, I told Trip, call back anytime. Call back any fucking time. It's not like I don't like the guy. I think I like the guy very much. He's an important part of our community. But doesn't mean, you know, he can't be boring. Anyway, here's the point. So they come out and they say, "Hey, look, fellas, we solved it for you. If you buy a premium pack, whatever these cards are, you'll get to see what's inside. You're not going to get to even see. Some of the games give you a percentage. Like you have an 8% chance of getting this item. You get a 7% chance of getting this item. But this is just telling you what's in it. And a lot of people, this article kind of leaves it at that, right? But this is actually really, I don't mind it because I like loot boxes. But if you read the fine print, it's actually kind of worse, right? Because here's what it really is. Let me walk you through it. You buy one of these passes. I don't know how much it costs, 25,000 or 350, whatever their currency is. It says, hey, here's what's going to be inside your pass. Are you sure you want this goddamn thing? You say, yeah, I want it. You buy it, you get it, you move on with your life. But you can say, yeah, I don't think I want it. If you decide not to buy the pack, maybe because you've seen what's in it and you're not interested in those players, the previewed pack remains in the store and there's a refresh timer. It'll basically say, okay, this pack is available for another 20 hours. So you can always come back in 20 hours, within 20 hours, 35 minutes, according to this, and you can acquire this pack. Cool. But the problem is, or the tricky part is now, if you want another pack, that one will not tell you what is inside, right? So basically what it's doing is it's saying, oh, no problem, we'll tell you what's in pack A. And if you're like, oh, I like pack A, but shit, there's pack B and I don't know what's in pack B. And pack B could have that really rare one that I'm going for. In a lot of ways, this is actually more, sinister, right? This is more, this is that sort of press your luck gambling mechanic, that actually is, if you're really opposed to this shit, this is kind of worse. Yeah, Realism says that's genius, right? It's total mind games, Abzar. Absolutely. So I don't know, man. They're only doing this for a month as a test, but I don't fucking know. I don't fucking know. All right, I'm bringing in Fluffier. Fluffier, it's Jaffe. What's up, pal? Fluffier, where are you? Why have they forsaken me? Fluffier, are you there? And then we're going to get to talking about E3. Fluffier, are you there? All right, well, I'll keep you on the line for a few minutes while I move on to another topic. But if you hear me, jump on in, buddy. Are you there?
Hey, I actually...
What's that, buddy? Yeah, okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
It's a little weird trying to hear the YouTube and the...
yeah, you got to turn off...
Discord.
You got to turn off the YouTube. You got to mute the YouTube.
I got it. Okay.
So what's up?
I look at this, and I'm looking at a lot of these loot box rates, and I play a lot of gacha games.
Okay,
so
yep.
If you're playing mobile games, the rates on those are actually given to you prior to you buying the boxes or buying the 10 times. So you can buy like 10 different chances to get whatever the featured unit is, or featured, because I guess this is, you're saying FIFA?
Yep, FIFA.
So there's probably like a top soccer guy that you like.
Right, that's
and you
right.
get like a 0.25% chance to get them. And I actually like that they tell me, like, hey, you're about to be ripped the fuck off.
Right.
Where you're going to buy, this 0.25% chance to get this unit. But, you get these XYZ% chances to get the other units. Give that to me up front so that I know that when I'm buying it, I'm being ripped off. I know that I'm buying.
Yeah, but most services have that now. Most services give you a percentage chance of what you're going to get.
That's true, right? And that's actually not. So let me phrase it this way. I've been playing a lot of gacha games on mobile, and I know that because of these lawsuits in Europe, where they're trying to call these like gambling games a scam, they're starting to give you these rates ahead of time so that when you buy it.
That's right. You're not
seeing
yep.
Right. So with FIFA. And I don't know if we find it more fun to not know, because it's just like, hey, here's this chance that I'm going to get this great soccer guy who's going to, up my roster so I can win more, pay to win. I figure, if I'm going to be spending the money, at least let me know my chances, right? And then I think you were saying something about they're going to tell people on the second box you don't know the rates.
That's right.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So basically, I would have maybe I missed it, but I read the Kotaku article twice, and Kotaku, I don't think. Oh wait, no. Okay, they did cover it in the second part. They have this read more thing. So yeah, it says to stop you just previewing until you get the cards you want. Once you've peeked inside, the pack and others of its type are put on a refresh timer. During that time, you cannot preview anymore. So you can preview one a day, basically, and if you buy it, then you can preview another one. But yeah, you can't just sit there and preview all day long.
Understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, are they changing the rates on the unit lower? So if there's like 5% chance to get the the gold unit, right? Are they moving it to 2.5%, or are they leaving it at 5?
I don't
and
know.
Adding in more.
I don't know how legal that is for them. Are you saying are they changing the rates on a custom?
Right. What I'm basically saying is that a loophole, because there's a lot of like the gacha games on mobile. If you play these, they leave it at a 5% chance, or it's a lot lower than that. It's probably like 0.25% chance to get a gold unit, right? And then, you summon multiple times after that, the rate doesn't go up or down. It's the same rate,
right,
up
right.
in any amount of times that you're summoning.
So what are you asking?
So I'm basically asking, is FIFA scamming people? Because they tell you, oh, you have a 5% chance to get, the best soccer guy in the game when you summon. But if you summon a second time, we're going to hide those rates from you, and we're going to move that 5% chance to 2.5. Do you know?
I know
that's what's happening.
Well, I know what you mean, but does FIFA even give you the percentage chances? Have they even gone to that method?
As it being a more European-centric game, I imagine they're giving people the chances of the rates.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I think you get into kind of legal territory there where because I know Amazon was accused of doing stuff like that, where the price for something for me would be different than the price for something for you based on my buying habits. And I don't know if that was deemed to be legal. So I would have to imagine that.
It's actually
I don't know. Well, of course, I mean, the whole thing is regardless, it's a psychological trick. They want you to want it. They want you to buy it. And again, I don't have a problem with it. It's you don't have to buy this shit. I mean, it's like that I've had this debate and argument over and over and over. It's like people act like, this is predatory, but it's like, well, then don't do it. Don't.
Yeah, it's like you have the choice. You don't have to buy this. I mean, maybe you want it because you want to be the best in the game. Because if it's PvP, that's pay to win.
Yeah,
right? And
that's right.
I consider it that. If it's PvE, it's just like, do you need it? I mean, if you're good and skilled, you can play with the bottom 5% characters and still win.
Well, but even if if the only reason you're playing a game is you're playing it to win it, and you're willing to spend money to win, and it's not skill,
absolutely.
I wouldn't play that game. I wouldn't play a game like that anyway. I mean, that's not a real fucking game. And that's whoever's got the money wins the game.
It's a fucking casino.
That's right.
So,
all right, man. I appreciate the call. Thank you, buddy. Off into the night he goes. That's a good point. It's a good point. All right, fellas, let's talk about E3 a little bit. E3, as you know, was just this last week. Look, so there was an interesting article in Game Industry Biz talking about E3. The headline is, E3 is no longer a clear lens on the industry. And I think that's true. And I'm not going to sit here. We've had, numerous conversations about what E3 was originally designed to be, how that really doesn't exist anymore, and how it doesn't make any sense why it would exist anymore. It doesn't serve a purpose, and it seems like a show in search of a reason to exist. So I think that's true. I know gamers would like it, but this is why this interests me, because it kind of comes right around the time that Sony has registered a new trademark for PSX. If you don't know PSX, that was what they called the PlayStation Experience. I think they've had 3 of them or 2 of them. One was in Vegas, one was in Orange County. They may have had one more. And then they've kind of gone dormant for the last handful of years, not just because of the pandemic, right? And so, look, a lot of it is that digital has absolutely decimated the need for the kind of conventions that have really come around and become huge, like Comic-Con or E3, even PAX to some extent. The cost of going to these things just doesn't make a lot of sense. So Obzar, see, this is the reason the conversation to me is interesting, because Obzar says, yeah, but gamers want their yearly Super Bowl equivalent. And I get that. And I get the value of that. However, that Super Bowl event, the Super Bowl event that exists, that is the Super Bowl in the NFL, makes people a shit ton of money, right? Well, E3 is very different. E3 requires companies to spend a lot of money to go there and to build booths and to fly their people out and put their people up in hotels and pay for fancy dinners at the Marriott Hotel at Staples Center and all that shit, right? And so now that it's kind of like, well, there's no need for them to spend that money. There's no need for them to give that Super Bowl experience. So GoldLink says E3 is like Comic-Con. It creates a unification with gamers while capitalizing on merch and ad revenue. Yeah, but it does the first thing, the unification of gamers, but it does not, it no longer, certainly doesn't capitalize on merch. And ad revenue, I'm not entirely sure kind of what you mean by that. Here's the bigger point, though, is what comes next, right? And I just want to talk about the two things. I think there should always be and will always be a demand for people to want to get together physically to celebrate the things that they enjoy. I think you're going to see live conventions, though, begin to contract the way that, not to the smallness of the original Comic-Con in the 70s, but I don't think it's in the best interest of companies to spend the kind of money that they used to need to spend to go to these shows. What value is it for them? And you've even seen companies dialing back their Comic-Con presence. A lot of these big studios, they'll either go to D3 or they'll just say D23, Disney's thing, or they'll say, yeah, I'm just not going to go. So you're going to start getting hobbyists, retro people, collectors. You're going to start seeing more specialized real life conventions. Like you'll see maybe more Final Fantasy conventions. You'll see more, Sony PlayStation Generation 1 conventions, right? You'll see more specific niche conventions, and you'll have like, oh, it's the guy who designed Jumping Flash. It's not my bias. I got a COVID. I've worked for these companies for over 20 years. I've seen how much it costs to go to these conventions. It's not an issue of bias. It's an issue of these companies don't spend money just to spend money because they want to make their dicks feel better. They spend money because they make money. PlayStation Experience, look at how well, let's take this, COVID. PlayStation Experience hasn't existed for the last 3 years. 2 years, 3 years, I forget. Do you really think, given how well the PS5 is selling, do you think PlayStation's going, you know what we really need, fellas? God damn, we need ourselves the PlayStation Experience back, because that's going to help us sell some fucking consoles, right? Everything in a business exists either for the short term or the long term gain of financial value, mostly, okay? So it's not that it's my bias. What I'm saying is I think you're actually going to get better conventions that are more niche and specified, like you've seen happening before Comic-Con. There used to be Star Trek conventions. There used to be literal, actual comic book conventions. Comic-Con was a comic book convention. But I'm not saying you're not going to see the big conventions either. I'm just saying they're going to go digital. And they're going to go digital in a way that they're going to, hey, call in and debate me on this, because there is no bias here. I'm about to tell you what I think is going to happen, okay? And this is coming from a guy that does not like, so far, the digital conventions. I was so excited for Comic-Con at home last year. I mean, I'm telling you, I nerded out because I love Comic-Con, man. I printed it. I didn't print out, but I had a big PDF of the show floor, and I was like, I'm going to go to every booth this year because there's no line, and I clicked on the booths, and it loaded up the webpage. And I kind of tried to enjoy it, and I did enjoy it a little bit, and I went to some of the panels, but they're not live. There's no Q&A. It's very edited, and it feels fake and forced and all that shit. But look, eventually, sooner than later, like right now, and by the way, this is whether you like my take on this or not, here's a public service announcement from your Papa Jaffe. Let me link you to the Discord real quick. Invite people. Sure. You got it, pals. Don't be boring. Ask Tripster what happens if you're boring. Hey, Tripster, call back. I'll keep you on if you're interested. Come on now. But look, here's a public service announcement. By the way, there's the Discord link right there. Some people have forgotten how amazing some of the past E3s have been. Dude, I was at the very first E3. I've been at almost every single goddamn E3. Just so you know, this relates to what we're talking about. But by the way, there's a lot of shit you can play right now. Right? Future Game Show is going to be live for the foreseeable future. This goes away, the Square demo of Strangers of Paradise on the PlayStation Store, which I can't access right now because they banned me. This goes away on the 24th, so you got plenty of time. Xbox, I think their stuff goes away today or tomorrow. There's a bunch of games you can play on Xbox, 40 games, 40 demos you can play. It's like being at E3 on your own, the real E3, like walking around. And then obviously if you got yourself a computer, there's over 700 fucking demos that you can play on Next Fest on Steam, and this goes until Tuesday. Okay, so let me just tell you that this is, there's the Future Game Show right there. This is ultimately where things are going to go. The problem is right now that these these online conventions suck. We really need we need instanced MMO style worlds, and this is starting. This is nascent. This exists, but it's very rare and it's very buggy. I'm surprised that this hasn't blown up yet, but it will. You need to be able to go in with your friends and walk around an actual show floor. Like, there was a convention on Steam about 4 months ago that was this. Like, they built the show floor, and it was like on a pirate island, and it had cool animation and music and everything. And it was super cool. But then you went up to the booth, and it was super uninteractive. There were no panels, and if there were panels, they were pre-recorded. And you had there was no social aspect. It wasn't like PlayStation Home. That's what it needs to be like. It needs to basically be. So if Sony's saying, yeah, we are going to do PlayStation, we're going to do PSX, but we're going to do it in our new version of PlayStation Home, and we're going to charge for tickets, that is the goddamn way to do it. So, like, if you're saying G Shyness in the chat says online E3 is kind of just a bunch of YouTube premieres, right now. But ultimately, Comic-Con, E3, all of this stuff is going to go digital, where you can link up with your friends from across the world, walk around the show floor together, have live panels. You're almost seeing all these things happen as individual pieces. There's a convention right now that's running where you can literally book one-on-one meet and greets with celebrities. Like, oh, these are the guys from Star Trek. It'll cost you $40, but you can get like a 10-minute window to talk to Geordie LaForge for 10 minutes at this time, Tuesday at 4:28 p.m. Be at your computer, and you get a sit down with Geordie LaForge, right? All of these things are out there. But the idea of them all coming together into one networked experience, I think the company that builds that and makes that infrastructure and makes that system not only really good, but makes it into a series of templates so that other conventions can subscribe to their template instead of having to build their own, I think they're going to make fucking bank. Why does it need to be more than YouTube premieres, says Adversary? It doesn't, but it should. I mean, why do graphics, in your opinion, for games need to be better? They don't, but they can, and people would like it. So for me, I can tell you, and maybe this is where my bias is coming in, I would much rather go to New York Comic-Con, or I would much rather go to PAX without having to book a trip, fly to Seattle, get a hotel, deal with waiting in lines, deal with just the crappy food. I would love to have merch that I could buy that's exclusive, and they would have a thing and you set it up once and it's easier to buy stuff. It's like, oh, you want to go to Artist Alley? I bought 3 things. I hit a button. It'll be at my house in 2 days, right? I think it's amazing. Let me bring in some people who want to have a conversation. Let me bring in Anari. 1 second. Anari, it's Jaffe. What do you want to talk about? Go.
Specifically about E3, you're saying it seems like you think that, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that E3 as a conference and as a dedicated platform is kind of irrelevant and it's going to be phased out, right?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be phased out. I think it should be phased out, and I can't imagine it not being phased out. But I absolutely think it is irrelevant. It is a dinosaur. It is a waste of money and a waste of time.
I mean, I don't really see that because I see
Why?
Like, a lot of games. Well, because you look at a lot of games and they're sold on hype. The reason why games like Cyberpunk and certain games sell so well is because the hype machine becomes so big that people will buy it no matter what is in that game. And I think that
what's wrong? Why? Yeah, but why does one thing have to do with the other? Hype is super important. I agree.
Well, because when there's a dedicated event to build up hype. And when people know if they tune in, they're going to get specific things. Like if it's a lot easier for new games and games that might not necessarily have all eyes on them to get eyes on them because people know, well, all the big games are going to be here. So if there's a new IP, people are more likely to know about it, right? If they're if it's being shown alongside games people already know.
But I'm saying that system should and can go digital. There's no, for example, what you're asking a company to do. You're asking a company, and I don't remember what the budgets were. I was at the very first E3, and it was from Sony ImageSoft. We had Twisted Metal there. I literally had a friend from college build the Sweet Tooth head that went on top of an ice cream truck we rented. It was very sort of very rough around the edges. And now obviously there are these professional companies that get hired to build booths and all of this shit. And the budgets to go to these shows have gone up and up and up and up. So if you're one of these companies that wants to build hype, whether you're a small game or a big game, do you really think it makes more sense to spend the certainly hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, when you throw in food and travel and hotels for all the people who need to go there? Does it make more sense to build that hype that way, or to use that money where you have a captive audience on the internet, whether it is a digital E3 event or whether you're making your own thing? I'm not saying the value that you're talking about is not valuable of building hype. I'm not saying the value that gamers want of a big celebration yearly of video games is not important. I'm just saying that the way it has been given to us for so many years is a dinosaur now, and I think it needs to evolve, and in evolving it can actually become better and more populated, and it can become more financially successful.
I mean, I think for games that are already established, if there are some games, no matter what, a new game in a certain series, like a new God of War game, is going to build hype. But if it's a new IP, right, a big way they get exposure is stuff at E3. And if you look at like personal in-person events, like companies already spend so much money, like flying out like quote unquote influencers and giving them like all these like goodies and doing all this stuff. I think that it's clear that this stuff works because they keep doing it, not just with E3. But with like, you look at Cyberpunk as an example, and like they were giving all the chairs away and fly, and like CD Projekt Red to fly people.
Right, but the cost of that was minimal. The cost of going to a YouTuber or a influencer on Twitch and saying, "Hey, we'll give you $25,000. I don't know what the amount is if you talk up our game and play up our game." Well, that's a hell of a lot of a better deal than we're going to spend $850,000 going to a convention and then going to another one that's PAX and then going to another one that's PAX East. It's like you can get that one streamer for a month and you do more hype than you could otherwise. I'm not denying that you guys are saying there is value, but the value can be acquired for a lot less money. And ultimately, if we go digital, not with all of these, I still think we want in-person conventions, but the scope of these conventions, if they go digital and the digital experience improves, I think you're going to have a much better way to communicate with your audience. I mean, think about this. You as a gamer, like the fact that gamers aren't, I mean, maybe they are, but I haven't seen it online. The fact that gamers are not jumping for joy because I was in the industry. I'm still enough in the industry that I can go to any fucking E3 I want to. But most of you guys couldn't walk into E3. And so you were stuck watching video and reading about it in magazines or online. Well, a digital convention, kind of like what you're seeing a piece of here with what Xbox is doing, what Sony did with the Square game, what Steam is doing, you can play these fucking games. You can actually fucking play them. How in the world that in and of itself is not exciting, more exciting than just like a bunch of trailers? I don't know.
I mean, the thing about, even if you're an indie game though, like you get it, like a lot of people go to E3 say that, you know, they start to meet indie devs, or they start to, indie devs can push their games out a lot better, and they can not only, like, they can see the actual reaction to people playing their games. They can actually interact with these people, and obviously they can do that on the internet.
Yep.
But I think people on the internet act very differently than they do in person, right? I think if you had an indie dev ask somebody what they thought about their game online versus in person, that would be a very different thing. So I do think there is value in having game developers being able to network with their fans.
Yeah, well, yeah, no one is saying there. I hear you. I hear you. And I'll tell you, I'm going to be honest with you, Nari. What I think I see when you guys are pushing back, I think it sounds to me, again, I'm not saying you don't like it. I'm not saying you're wrong for liking it. But trying to justify it in the face of the facts that I'm giving you in terms of the value of it for the people who have to spend the money, that's the argument. It's not that there's no value to it.
Well, I think it depends on the company. Like there are some companies that don't necessarily need to spend as much money because they know that if they put out their game, the hype's going to be there regardless. But then there are other companies where they need that exposure.
but what does that exposure give you? So I'm looking at my screen right now. I'll bring it up. So there's this game, I've never even fucking heard of it. Grow Song of the Evertree, okay? Well, it looks, I'm not making fun of it. It was colorful and my eye went to it, so I'm putting my mouse over it. You can get this demo right now. Okay, so look, man, I've been to E3s, a bunch of them. There are, I don't know how many games, but there are so many games that just having Grow Song of the Evertree in the back of the small hall of E3, you know, that's not going to suddenly give that game a better chance than if they take the same money and pay 10 streamers that kind of speak to their audience directly to stream it. Or
I mean, maybe that's a specific indie game because it's so niche. But if you look at something like No Man's Sky, that started off as an indie game, right? And if No Man's Sky just released somewhere on the internet and wasn't at E3, do you think it would have had as much hype? Like, because No Man's Sky was like featured with Sony. It was
featured at Sony because Sony found it and Sony said we want this. It wasn't featured at Sony because, look, you think Shuhei Yoshida is relying on E3? Shu knows about all these games years, or at least a year.
I'm saying that like people who need the exposure. It depends on the. I think maybe more indie dev conventions, like maybe that might replace E3.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to in-person conventions. I'm just saying that this E3 no longer serves its function. I don't think PAX serves its function. They're too expensive. They don't really serve a purpose anymore. And I think we're seeing the last of them, but I think we will see them replaced with really cool digital.
Well, why can't the purpose shift? Like
it can, but it doesn't need to be E3 because E3 is owned by a company that needs to make enough money to keep it going. But yeah, you could have a bunch of indie people. You could have like
I think the E3 name carries enough weight that there is value in using it to market games, regardless. Because people know E3. Oh, this is like when all the big games happen.
Nobody gives a shit. That that used to be CES, and then it was E3, and suddenly it's E3, and suddenly it's PAX. I mean, these things take no time to get into the zeitgeist if they are offering something cool. All right, man. Thanks for the call, buddy. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, let me bring back in. It's interview. Sohrab is back. What's up, man? Are you there?
Man, I have to jump in on this conversation.
All right, go.
Yeah, I think it boils down to this for everyone. As someone who's both been to E3 and hasn't been to E3, right? There's a lot of romanticization that we have with E3 of what it is, what the show can achieve. And I think someone was saying, hey, it's all about exposure and all that. And I think they're absolutely true. But really the equation that they need to look at, and this is the equation that Sony has been working at very diligently and on purpose with, is this. If they go to E3, it's going to cost them millions of dollars to put on the show. Whether it's $5 million or $15 million, it's almost irrelevant. It's in the millions, right? But if you look at what Sony's doing on the digital front, right now I'm looking at their YouTube channel. They have 13.2 million followers. Instagram, 29 million. They have another 22 million followers on Twitter and almost 39 million followers on Facebook. They can just go here, in quotations, for free and put out the game that they're about to release, and way more people will immediately know about it than them going on E3 and needing to spend the millions that we're talking about. And I think for them, that's what they've learned. That's why there hasn't been a PAX, and that's why they left E3, is they've realized that they can do these shows themselves digitally and have way more control over it and way more bang for the buck than if they were to go to E3.
I agree, and I think, you know what, I think, I hate to sound like a total dick, but fuck it, I don't care. I think sometimes, maybe I put too much faith in certain people who I have conversations with that have not been in the industry, but I don't lie to people, right? Like I'm not trying to piss in their cornflakes. I know there are people who romanticize E3. I know there are people that are like, I just want to go to E3. It sounds like Disneyland, blah, 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 blah. And I get it. And there was a time when it was like that. I mean, E3 for the last 5-6 years has not. I remember, one of the first times I think I met you in person is you and me and your girlfriend. Is it your wife now, Allegra?
Yeah, wife
okay,
now. Yep.
Right. So we walked around E3, and it was one of the last E3s that was massive, that had tons of games, that wasn't just the big publishers, that you could walk up to almost any kiosk and play. That is not that show anymore. The show is now, it's less games, there's a lot of waiting in line, and a lot of the times you go into a booth, you watch a video that's going to be on YouTube anyway at the end of the day. It's not what it was. And so a lot of people hear me talk about wanting to see it change for the better, and it's like, I'm not trying to take your fun away. I'm just like telling you that let's maybe celebrate what is coming, which is I do think we are going to see an amazing age of digital conventions, and not the kind that we've had over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. I think we're going to see MMOs that are basically conventions, and it's going to be fucking awesome. But
yeah, I mean, it's not coincidence that Sony now has an investment into the makers of Fortnite, right? They see that.
That's right.
From their music, right? They see from their movie and music arm that, hey, someone like Travis Scott can throw a concert in here, or we can do trailer premieres. Their entertainment division is 100% aware of this, and now they're putting their money behind that too. Don't think that what you're saying, I think, is that far off. Why would they put money into it? Because I think they see that this has a future and it can impact their business positively, and I think in the ways that you're talking about.
Right. I agree. I got a guy in the chat saying Jaffe is burnt out on E3 and now yearns for events like the Summer Games Fest by Keighley. I did not think the Summer Games Fest by Keighley was all that great. I thought Day of the Devs was better. But yeah, it's got nothing to do with being burnt out. It has everything to do with looking at the model and looking at the system and saying, this doesn't make sense. Okay. All right, man. Thanks for the call again. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
All right, buddy.
All right, let's move on. I mean, again, think what you want. I mean, there's nothing I can do to convince you if you don't want to be convinced, if you don't want to actually open your goddamn mind to the goddamn truth. But the truth of the matter is that you can't justify the cost anymore, fellas. You just can't. You just can't do it. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Kojima for a minute. Now, I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't really care. I personally don't really care if they remake Silent Hill. I thought PT was pretty gosh darn good. I am excited to see if Kojima works in horror, but it's kind of like the same thing I said about, what's it called? Deadspace, which is, at this point, that license is so old that, yeah, there's a nostalgia aspect, and that's great. But it's not like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've played not all of the Silent Hill games, but I played a little bit of 2. It was too old when I got to it. I played the one on the Wii, the one that was like the girl in the frozen swing. I played the one on the PSP that was the isometric. I played the one in the apartment. I don't dislike Silent Hill. I think, in fact, we might stream the Silent Hill movie coming up. I just don't think that right, Konami is following Kojima on Twitter, says Edward. Yeah, there's a lot of hints that maybe this thing is happening, and that's great. I'm not going to be upset if they make Silent Hill. I'm just saying that I would be excited if Kojima said, I'm making a horror game. That's all I care about. Whether it's called Silent Hill or not, how much of the lore of Silent Hill is consistent throughout the games. Now, maybe if you're hardcore, you would say, dude, you don't fucking understand Triangle Head or whatever, the Pyramid Head, maybe that's true. But for me, Silent Hill has always felt, and I'm not a hardcore fan. I'm a hardcore fan of horror, but I'm not a hardcore fan of that particular license. To me, Silent Hill has always felt like Final Fantasy in the sense that it's more of a shorthand for horror. It's not a shorthand for, it's the story of this one guy like Solid Snake, and we go through his life. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. But anyway, though, here's the main thing that is, to me, interesting about this, which is again, I don't want to take your fun away, fellas. I really don't. I don't care that Kojima's doing this. It doesn't matter to me. But am I the only one that's kind of getting tired of the reindeer games? It's like really just go away and make what you are capable of making, which is awesomeness. Kojima is one of my favorite designers. Metal Gear Solid is one of my favorite IPs. I'm very, and even though I didn't lose my shit like a lot of y'all for PT, I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Yeah, Rudra, call in, buddy. And I'm excited for what he does next. But is it just me that's starting to feel like this is feeling dated? I'm not Debbie Downer. I am not Debbie Downer realism. I love fun stuff, but I'm just demanding. It's like if you're gonna play the ingenue, if you're gonna play the Enigma, ingenue's wrong, Enigma's right. If you're gonna play the Enigma only works if it is enigmatic. But this is just like, oh, he's doing that thing that he does. Oh, fuck you, Saber. So that was really my only question. Kofit, I'm about to ban you, buddy. I don't have time for this. I don't want it. I'm not in the mood for it today, man. It's not the stream is Jaffe's tired of everything. You know what here's what I am tired of, though. I will tell you what I am tired of. I'm tired of people acting like when someone brings up something that isn't all sunshine and rainbows, that person is deemed a hater or someone who's negative. I don't have to have everything be perfect in order to love something. I literally just prefaced the whole Kojima thing by saying he's one of my favorite developers. I loved PT. Metal Gear is one of my favorite franchises. And I'm being negative because I bring up one thing? Come on, man. How do you get through your day like that? Eternal says Abandon's a code name and they have teased what it is. Super realistic in look and gameplay. Let me ask you this. Is Abandon the same game that there was something called Untitled Horror Game for a while? And that was the one that had that weird looking thing that when the character turned around in POV, there was this weird fucking thing looking through the door just for like a couple of frames. Is that what this is, or is Untitled Horror Game a totally different video game? Is that not the same thing? Why pay E3 when the budget can go into advertising? I agree with that, Isaac. All right, Anari, go. Don't be boring. Go.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about like a franchise like Silent Hill not being interesting or being too old to be like this to, I guess, be worth all this like pomp and circumstance. Like I don't really see that at all, and I do think that because of everything that happened with Kojima and Konami, the idea that he would come out and work on a Silent Hill game is very surprising, and I think like absolutely it is worth this kind of teasing and this kind of, because it is something. I mean, it's a marketing thing first and foremost, right? It's to draw attention to the game, and also
okay, but let's take that. It's to draw attention to the game. Really? Do you really think? Okay, the number of people that are paying attention to this, that are actually trying to figure out what it is. I'm not saying it's not fun for them. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it, but is it really necessary? The minute Kojima comes out and says, I'm making anything, let alone a horror game, let alone a Silent Hills game, aren't we going to, the number of people that would pay attention to this, it's not like they're going to go, oh, I wasn't interested until he basically started tweeting all this random shit. I'm not saying he shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that if you really, here's what I'll say. All right, here's what I'll fucking say. If you love Kojima like you say you do, and I do love Kojima, he's one of my favorite developers, then you know what you don't get to do? You don't get to act like you're still surprised. One of the great things about Kojima is he surprises you. When you plugged that controller in and Psycho Mantis vibrated it and it said Hideo instead of video. And when he saw that you played Castlevania, that was surprising, right? When he dropped hints about whatever that company was that was making Metal Gear 4, when he had the fake guy with bandages and all that shit, that was surprising. This is more. This is more of the same. So
it's totally surprising enough that like you have games journalists saying, "Oh, this is total. It's totally not true. They're not making a Silent Hill game," and people doubting it, saying, "Oh yeah, no, it's not a Silent Hill game." Like you see that everywhere. Clearly, it's surprising enough people that there are many people that still don't believe it, despite all the evidence, right?
I think it's pretty obvious. Well, it's either obvious Kojima's trolling or it's obvious that this is real. I mean, this is clearly staged. I mean,
but you think, but I'm saying like his target audience, right? Kojima's target audience are the kind of people to pay attention to stuff like this. Like to be honest,
sure.
To me, this is like him appealing to his niche. That's his niche. His niche is people who like horror, who like mystery, who like these kinds of.
I like horror. I like mystery. I like Kojima, but
yeah,
this isn't mysterious. This is same old shit. That's all I'm saying. It's like if we're gonna have a Hideo Kojima circle jerk, which I happen to be more than happy to get involved with, because I think he's great. Shouldn't we hold him to the standard of why we think he's great? Is that he's surprising?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
This isn't surprising.
If he did this for Death Stranding, I would agree with you. Like Death Stranding is not necessarily like the idea that Kojima would be working on a new game is not surprising to anyone. Now, the idea that he might be working on a new Silent Hill game is absolutely surprising, especially with everything that's happened with Konami. This is a big deal, like especially for Kojima in his career, I think, because people thought he would never work on like another Silent Hill or Metal Gear game ever again, and people have been living with that idea for so long. So I do think it is a big deal that he is coming out and working on it. Right?
Gotcha. All right, man. All right. I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you, Nari. Let me bring in Kuristafa. Kuristafa, what do you think?
Hello?
Hey, what's up? What do you think about all this nonsense?
Which nonsense? The Hideo Kojima?
I don't know. What? I'm just fucking around. Whatever you want to talk about, go.
No, I just wanted to talk about E3. Like, I think there are some benefits to E3, such as it really helps smaller developers because it's kind of the only time of the year when everybody cares about games. So if you get that chance to be like, hey, if I got an indie game and 1 million people sees it, then I might do well, which is, great for smaller people. And it's also great for young people to go and meet some older people in the development industry. But from my experience with E3, it's just been a shit show for the past, 3-4 years. Every time, I'm not the biggest guy there, but every time I go there, I get treated poorly by the staff. Everything is unorganized. I don't feel valuable, even though I'm someone who has interest in the field. And I wish that kind of thing would change, but it hasn't. And the only thing E3 has done in the past few years has been like, oh, we'll just let, any random Joe pay $250 to come. And now it's like, nobody wants to go to E3 anymore. I don't want to go to E3, which sucks because I actually do like meeting some friends. I met one of my friends from Insomniac at E3. We had lunch and we became friends. Those kinds of moments happen. Now it's like, well, what the fuck? What do I do now?
Well, E3 hasn't been E3 that you're describing for a while anyway. I think they let people in because remember I was at the first E3 that took place in Santa Monica, where they were like, okay, well, the old E3, because remember what was happening is I think a lot of the developers or publishers were saying, a lot of the developers were saying, we're not getting anything out of it because there's too much there. And that was when they said, okay, let's make it more like the Cannes Film Festival. And all the people had their own hotels and the press had to walk along the sort of the Venice Boulevard to get to the different hotels. It's I don't know, man. Fuck it. I don't care. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of trying to be the guy that it's like, I'm not going to mommy coddle you. The fact is it's no longer relevant. It's lost its relevancy. Do I think hype is important? Fuck yeah, I think hype's important. Do I think having a big moment for gamers to rally around is fun? Yeah, it's fun. But it needs to be monetized and it needs to be practical or it's not going to happen. And I'm sorry if that's me telling you that there's no Santa Claus, but that's the goddamn truth. That's the goddamn truth. E3 for me was all about the press, says Orang. I miss the old vibe and the cringe of it. Yeah, but they don't have to do that anymore. They weren't doing that for fun. They were doing that because it made them money. What, did the stream die? What do you mean you broke Jaffe? You didn't break Jaffe. I can't handle when I'm look, here's the deal. If I'm going to drop some fucking facts and logic, it's MOMMYCODDLE. It's not mollycoddle. It's not mollycoddle. It's MOMMYCODDLE. Why would it be mollycoddle? I love Santa too, Danny. I'm not trying to take anybody's fun away. I'm saying, hey, what can we do to make the fun come back in a different way that's relevant? Why can't E3 be a consumer convention, says Chris. Okay, who would show up for it? Right? What would you have to do? And I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm saying, but that's what I was saying. I think there will be a digital E3 and a digital Comic-Con that is actually like what we want. It'll be Ready Player One. It'll be PlayStation Home. It'll be networked. We'll be able to go with our friends. We'll be able to have live panels and things like that. But if you're talking about a consumer-based E3, in order to make that something that people want to pay to go to, like let's say Anime Expo in Los Angeles, you have to motivate the companies to be there. And you have to motivate the companies to want to spend the many hundreds of thousands, if not more, dollars it takes to get there and get their people there and cause their dev teams to sort of have to make a specific demo just for a show that lands on some arbitrary date that doesn't necessarily work for the dev team. So I think you're going to see more conventions, but they're going to be smaller. And those will exist for sure. Why would it be mollycoddle? I thought it was, I'm going to look it up. I thought it was MOMMYCODDLE because it was like, oh, your mommy has to take care of you. But you might be right. Molly or MOMMYCODDLE. Let's look it up, fellas. Let's look it up together. Let's learn something together. MOMMYCODDLE, a family field guide. Mollycoddle. Okay, here we go. Dated, disparaging, pampered, to treat with excessive degree of indulgence. So I guess it is mollycoddle. Why would it be mollycoddle? I always thought it was MOMMYCODDLE. Okay, well, there you go. There you go. How old am I? I'm 50. I'm 50. Right, mommy makes more sense, but it's almost like what's coming down the pike, but a lot of people say pipe, and pipe makes more sense based on, oh, something's in a pipe and it's coming down the hill. Pike doesn't make sense. It's also like you've got another think coming or thing coming. Anyway, all right. Fuck you, Deus M. I'm not ready to go to blows. I'm just, we're having a conversation, pal. Six says, I don't care about E3 as a logo or event. I just want the cool WrestleMania-style gaming show. Lots of trailers and reveals. Nintendo Directs and the PlayStation knockoff are great. Works for me. Well, I'm with you, but I do think we're going to get better than that. I think we're going to get more than that. I think, I have had very little interest in being back in video games as a creator. But if somebody came to me and said, hey, do you want to work with us to design online conventions? Because I love conventions, man. And I think online conventions would be a goddamn joy. I'd be there in a heartbeat. What made E3 unprofitable, says Opzar? Well, the fact that ultimately, okay, E3 existed. I've said this before. Yeah, Tripster, call back. See if you can do it. But what made it profitable was it was necessary for two reasons. One was advertising, right? Because magazines ruled the roost, and the only way to get information to people, even after magazines with the web, was you had to use those folks with marketing that were writing for IGN and GameSpot, whatever. Well, now with Nintendo Direct and with State of Play and all these other things, and like we were talking earlier, the YouTube channel, the Instagram channel, the Facebook channel for PlayStation, there's no need for them to spend that money to get the word out, okay? The other value of it, it was profitable, VVLMM, in that it was profitable in that the companies had a reason to spend money, right? But they needed the advertising. They needed to have the buyers from Target and Walmart and all the retail places come to play the games in hopes of going, we're going to up our orders of Twisted Metal because we saw all the hype and we saw all the show excitement and we played it. And our guy that we send around to all the booths came back and he's a gamer and he's like, dude, this game's awesome. We were only going to get like 60,000 copies across all stores. We're going to double our orders for Christmas for Twisted Metal. That was also the value of E3. So it was easy to look at the hundreds of thousands of dollars plus that it took to fly people out, get your booth set up, get your people out there, get your people fed, all that shit. And go, well, it's a cost, but we're going to make that cost up by the benefit. But that doesn't exist anymore. And so you're asking these companies to spend a lot of money for no reason. Connor says, Jaffe, what's the plans for the next week's streams? Okay. Well, Jazzy John Romero will be here this Thursday. It's going to be an early one, fellas. It's going to be 7 a.m. California time. Yeah, I'm going to ban COVID. Sorry, buddy. There you go. And I'm just going to let you know why. It's here's the deal. We only have room on the stream for, like, we have Bacon Magma. Bacon Magma knows where the line is, and he's silly, and he's kind of filling that gap already, right? He's filling that gap already. He's kind of inflammatory. He says stupid shit, but his heart's in the right place. He's a good guy. He sucks at Mortal Kombat, but he's a good guy. But I can't have more than one of those people in the show or in the chat because it really just makes the place feel like a shitburger. And that's not what I'm interested in. So when your timeout ends, COVID, and you want to come back and you want to be a normal human, and Bacon's clever sometimes. Yeah, is Kofi in the New Day? Sure. Then isn't he over at WWE today? Aren't they doing a pay-per-view? But yeah, we already have Bacon. We already have that. We don't need another one, and you're just bringing everything down. So please don't do that. Okay. But yeah, Connor, so Romero's coming on this week. Alana Pierce, my understanding, is going to be on in July. I'm looking to get some new guests on. I know I've talked to Tim Schafer. I've talked to a big name that is interested but is a little hesitant, so I'm trying to get him to come on the show. So I'm going to get some more folks on pretty soon. But right now we know that this week we have John Romero on Thursday. It'll be 7 o'clock in the morning, California time. So hopefully you guys will be able to join us for that. I did not run. Hogwash was on earlier. Hogwash is probably is probably watching wrestling right now. You can't pick on Bacon because he's the approved class clown. Yeah, you can pick on Bacon. I pick on Bacon all the time. I mean, I could say all kinds of things that would get me in trouble about picking on Bacon. But yeah, I'm, there's only so that goes a little bit of that goes a long way. That's all I'm saying. All right, fellas, that is today's stream. I appreciate you being here. I will be streaming tomorrow, either games or a proper Gabbin' and Games. We will be back Thursday. To the mods that are here, thank you guys very, very much. To the new members and the super chatters, I appreciate it. To all of you guys, thank you guys very much for being around and having a good, interesting conversation with me. I hope you had a good time. I had a good time. And I will see you guys very